Today, I am joined by Glenn Sturm, an internationally published author and speaker whose life was profoundly reshaped by a life-threatening cancer diagnosis. Facing one of the hardest battles imaginable, Glenn chose to turn adversity into growth, transforming his experience into a message of resilience, faith, and personal reinvention. His journey isn't just about surviving cancer, it's about redefining purpose and discovering strength in the face of uncertainty. So today, we'll talk about that journey, the lessons he's learned, and how hardship can become a catalyst for a more meaningful life. Hello, Glenn. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. Looking
I
forward to
love
our conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. Before we get into your cancer journey, can you talk with us a little bit about who Glenn was before that? Like, I know you're an accomplished attorney, you were in the military. Let's learn a little bit more about you.
Well, I guess it started with my dad was an Army officer, so I went to 12 schools from first grade through 12th. So we just moved all the time. And that kind of defined me. And I was graduating from high school towards the end of the Vietnam War, but they were still drafting people. I had a wonderful draft lottery number of 33, so I had a choice between being drafted as a private or taking an ROTC scholarship that would pay for everything. And so I took the latter. And as a result of that, I spent 4 years on active duty. I never really wanted to go in the Army, never would have thought about it, but for the draft, it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, though, because the Army became a large portion of my life. I stayed on active duty for 4 years. As a result of my scores on some graduate exams, the Army paid for a fellowship and got my master's then, and then got out and went to work in business for a medical supply company. And the one statistic I remember from those days, I got promoted 4 times in 2 years. It was kind of ridiculous. They all involved a relocation. Was that we were all worried about as executives of the company that our GDP had hit, medical care as a percentage of GDP had hit 10%. And we were all freaking out about that because how long could our economy support that level of expense? And today we're over 20%. So it was just a foreshadowing. But after all those promotions and everything, I'd always wanted to go to law school because I always wanted to have my own business. But I came from a military family, so I didn't know how to do that. So I went to law school and ended up doing pretty well in law school. And as a result of that, I had a bunch of job offers from very good firms all around the country. And I accepted a position in Atlanta and did really well there. And I made partner 2 years out of law school. And it might have been 3, but I think it was 2. And then was the corporate chairman of my law firm at 5 years out of law school. And so I was successful as an attorney. I did corporate securities. I couldn't do litigation. That was tearing things apart, and I like building things. So I did IPOs and did a lot of financial technology, fixed a lot of problem banks, and just had a great, existence. In the late 90s, the internet started popping up, and I started the first internet banking software company that enabled banks to go on the internet, and we went public in '99 while I was still chairman of the law firm, and my last child was born that year. So after a period of time, I decided that I didn't need to be doing 3 things. I need to do 2 well. So I resigned as the CEO of the company that I founded and went back to practicing law full time, being a dad. And things were great until January 21st, 2009, when I was on my way to the University of North Carolina to give a presentation. And my phone rang. And in those days, you didn't mind taking a phone call that you didn't recognize the number because spam wasn't really existing yet. And it was one of my doctors. I was a runner then. I did marathons and some triathlons. And this doc was a doc who, was part of the group who ran things together. And so she said, "Glenn, we got the results of your biopsy back." And it was January 21st, 2009. I'll never forget the day. And I said, what biopsies? Well, they'd done the biopsies in early December. And he said, well, they came back, they're positive for cancer, Glenn. And I just said, what? And I said, I ran with a bunch of doctors. They were all jokesters, and they always gave the lawyer a hard time about everything. I said, okay, who put you up to this? It's a bad joke. And she said, no, Glenn, this is not a joke. You've got cancer, and I need to see you tomorrow or today if possible. And I said, well, not today. I'm at the airport. I'm at gate B13 getting ready to fly to North Carolina to give a speech. So that's how it started. And it was just kind of like a total earth-shaking event. And over the next 3 weeks, you don't remember a whole lot. I do remember one article I read that it's stayed with me ever since then. I wish I could find it again. But it talked about a person who had my cancer who had died, and he was thankful for the 6 months he had before he passed. And I was reading this, and I thought that was kind of strange. But he said, basically, I'm so lucky because unlike my friends who were in Vietnam and died in the war, or who've had a heart attack, or have died in a car wreck, I've had time to say goodbye, to make amends, and to do the right thing. And so when I went to Yale after those 3 weeks, and my doctor at Yale, Dr. Foss, confirmed I did have cancer. I said that day, and I wrote it in my first Caringbridge post, that no matter what happened, I wasn't going to let cancer define me. And I've tried to live that way since then. So after a year, first year I was on oral chemo. And towards the end of that year, I had to go on IV. And it was 3 days every 3 weeks. And there was no end in sight. There still is no end in sight, but it's something I've gotten used to. I can tell a few jokes about that. But what happened was I'm 54 years old, and it's the prime of a career. And I'm running the corporate side of a major law firm. And what happens? I can't stay because all the insurance companies are worried about chemo brain, and I'm doing multi-billion-dollar deals, and I'm in charge. So if you're in charge, you can't miss something, because your job is to make sure nobody else has missed anything. And so I ended up having to leave the firm and trying to redefine myself. And so that's where it starts.
Wow. So there's so many people that are either the recipient of that conversation or with someone when they get that news, that awful C word that so many of us have been a part of. What does someone like that, when they're sitting in there, like, how do you even process that?
Well, one of the things that you've got to do is, first of all, I'm a problem solver by my nature. That's the reason I did well as a lawyer. Our mission statement was we provided creative business solutions to complex problems and added value in the process. So to me, it became a problem I had to solve without knowing anything about it. Everybody reacts differently, but what I tried to do is I did the one definitional thing, and then I started doing things. What else can I do to make the world better? So one of my daily objectives is to put a smile on somebody's face every day. And then you can have real fun with that. Because if you see people, you can do that. But when the hard ones are when you're on a phone with a call center, like somebody with an airline or something, and they're obviously, like today, would be having a very bad day with all the cancellations in the flights, and you try to get them to laugh. You got to be very subtle about how you do it, but you got to work in there a smile, because you can't see them smile, but you can hear them smile. And you work at that. And the thing that's so beautiful about that is when you put a smile on their face, you put a smile on your face. And when you get that reputation, other people want to be around you. And that kind of segues into another thing. When somebody will ask you a question once you've got cancer, how are you feeling? Well, that's not a question. That's a greeting. Because you tell them how you're feeling, really. And honestly, they'll run for the hills. They'll never talk to you again. And sometimes that might not be a bad idea. But, there are all sorts of these little things. And the other phrase I love is we must all give up hope for a better yesterday. We can't change the fact that we got cancer, but we can change today and tomorrow. And those are the kind of things that I try to do. And I've got little cheat sheets that I sometimes have to pop up to remind myself if it's a bad day, what to do and, how to communicate properly.
So here you're in your mid-50s and you get this diagnosis. Your career life has changed because you're not able to do that anymore. You're a father. Anytime you have a major transition in life, it can be hard to pivot, and especially when you're dealing with a severe diagnosis. So what steps at first did you take that, brought you to the point where you're writing a book and sharing with the world about your story?
Well, that is, you don't know me, and that's probably the absolute perfect segue. Because right after that diagnosis came, I got a few other things. My dog died. My mentor, lifelong, professional mentor, died. My dad turned into a short-term terminal situation, and I got served with divorce papers. No, that's fine. And my general practitioner said, Glenn, with all these things going on, you probably need to talk to a psychiatrist. And I'd never even thought about that. So I said, okay. He was pretty insistent on it. So I was okay. So I go to see her. And so Dr. Dorney, who's my psychiatrist, who I still see to this day, was so special. It's unbelievable. The side effects that I experienced initially were being tired. Now it's called cancer fatigue syndrome. And then, what do you do about it? Well, at the time, if you read the research on it, it said what you need to do is exercise a little bit more. Well, I was running marathons, so I don't know how much more I want to do that. And then get more sleep. And I said, I don't want to do more of that. I want to do things. So it got so bad when I went on IV, I was falling asleep in the middle of the day. And I got diagnosed with narcolepsy, which basically means, it's a sleep disorder. And so they put me on a medicine that eliminated that. Well, all my energy came back with that. And I've been on that medicine now I'm in my 18th year on it. And it just worked. So one of the things I learned was that, having, Dr. Dorney around was great. Well, the other thing I did was I went back to my practice as a lawyer. We always had teams. And I just looked up and I saw my golden retriever over my right shoulder. And whenever I did a deal, I could have as many as 30 or 40 lawyers on a team. I mean, I have a tax lawyer, we'd have litigators sometimes analyzing things, but you always had a team. They always had roles. Well, immediately I had my oncologist and I had a psychiatrist. Well, the other thing I had was I started having occasional balance issues. So I got a physical therapist, and my oncologist was very helpful there. And they got me approved for 4 or 5 days of physical therapy, one-on-one, that lasted for almost 10 years. And so that was the third member of my team. And then I got an acupuncturist and somebody else. And the team is a big deal. And we're just now learning about how important the teams are. But I approached it as a team situation. And then, I just shook my head. And so, we're getting that under control. We've gotten, my energy levels fixed. We've got my cognitive issues addressed somewhat. And, now I'm able to do things again. So, what else do we do? And so I started building the teams and things. And, today they're called, fully integrated multidisciplinary cancer care teams. And with the research that's come out in the past 2 years, the mortality rate has dropped so dramatically for people who are treated that way versus silos. It's unbelievable. I've written my first book, which was Cancer Set Me Free, but my next book is called More Than Hope, the promise of fully integrated multidisciplinary cancer care teams, where the my mortality rate has gone down by 70% for my cancer by use of those teams. Whereas if you're in a silo-based practice, it's not gone down at all. So it's more and more compelling evidence of it. What I didn't realize, I'd put my own team together, but I had holes in that team that I've identified over the years to do it. But everybody needs a team. You really can't do this by yourself. And then the question is who is your team and what members are there? Because your principal oncologist is going to be so busy that they don't have the time to be your head of your team. So who is it? Well, the fun thing about it is that in my case, it evolved. My physical therapist would, my cancer presents itself in the skin sometimes. Whenever she saw something on my back, she'd take pictures of it and send it to my oncologist. Whenever she saw a difference in my energy levels, she would send my oncologist a note. So what that taught me was how important that communication line was. Well, today, the multidisciplinary teams really don't work well unless there's a formal communication structure in place where the members of the team can communicate with each other. And how important is this change in cancer care? Well, if you look at it, in the lowest improvement areas, it's like 14 to 16% reduction in mortality rates. And in the highest areas, it's a 90% reduction in mortality rates. So I've taught corporate finance at the graduate school level. That's one of my other things, my arrows in my quiver. So I can do financial analysis. So I did a quick analysis by weighted average by the type of cancers and where the improvements were, and said, how much would a company increase its net worth if it got these results? And it's at least 800 or 900 billion, maybe $1 trillion in value that's created by putting these teams together. Now, there are people who are going to fight it because they're losing control of some aspects of it. There are insurance companies who don't like it because people like me live longer, and I'm on chemo every day still, and I'm in the hospital next week for my next round of IV. So they have to keep paying for that stuff. But there are all sorts of constituencies that are gonna complain about it. But NIH and everybody else that writes about it has said over and over again that it's so compelling, it's unbelievable. There's the Williams and Thompson study that analyzed 56,300 cancer patients and identified the reduction in mortality rates. The American Cancer annual statistics shows 5-year survival rate's gone up to just 70% now. And these are just staggering statistics. But the overwhelming thing is every single article I found has shown that the multidisciplinary approach reduces mortality risk dramatically, and that there's no change in the silo-based approaches, reduction in mortality rates. They haven't changed. So the next question is why hasn't this been on TV? Why hasn't this been on the front page of every major newspaper in the country? And that's the reason I'm writing my next book that'll be out in April. That will address those things. So, and it'll give people the roadmap on how to get a team, and if you don't have a team, how to put your own together.
There's a few things I want to dive into on that. So first of all, how to do it yourself if you need to, the importance of advocating for yourself, not only when you have a diagnosis, but even when you're healthy, because a lot of times it takes you, challenging maybe the opinion of a professional that you're talking to, or getting a second or third opinion as well. Let's talk a little bit about that importance about self-advocating, being that agent for yourself.
I wrote these two sentences this morning. The question is no longer whether integrated multidisciplinary care works. The question is whether your institution is providing it. Okay. And so I'm doing an introduction to a thing we're going to be posting soon. And you have to build your own team if they won't, but you've got to know what to ask for. Okay. So how hard is it to find it? Well, it's really hard to find out who should be the members. And I'll give you an example. I had liver failure, I think about year 6 or 7. My AST levels and ALT levels were doubling every 3 weeks. And so they made me see a liver doctor, liver oncologist, and she couldn't figure it out. And then she worked with some doctors at Oxford, and they couldn't figure it out. And finally, they put me on the liver transplant list. And I said, oh, this isn't going to happen. I've got cancer. They're really going to waste a liver on a middle-aged guy with cancer. And so I said, I got to figure out this myself. So what I did was I love math. And so I looked at every variable for 2 years that I could identify: changes in dietary things, changes in workouts, changes in medicines, changes, in my chemo routines, everything. And then I ran correlation coefficients to see if I could determine what was causing the problem. Mm. And it came out to be with a delay factor I had to add in to find it, a correlation coefficient of 0.96, which is basically 96% correlation. So I go back to Yale and say, well, I figured it out. I know what's causing it. It's this medicine you gave me when you took me off of a leave. And they said, Glenn, correlation doesn't mean causation. And I was kind of taken aback by that. I said, well, we're going to figure it out anyway, because I'm not going to take that drug again when you prescribe me. Well, 3 weeks later, my AST and ALT levels had not changed. 6 weeks after that, they had gone down. And 6 weeks after that meeting, 9 weeks after that meeting, they were back to normal. So I went back and said, do you think we've identified causation? And they said, yeah, Glenn, I think we probably have. And I said, well, I've got it better than that. I know the venture capital fund who funded that drug, and I've already talked to the CEO of it. And in the tens of thousands of people who were in their trials for this medicine, they had 3 people with cancer. All 3 of them were taking the same chemo agent that I had, and they had liver failure. So that caused a black box warning label, one of several that I've had, because I've had to advocate for myself. Because if you don't figure it out, you can't assume other people are going to figure it out. Now, I've made a list of all the members of it that I think should be in a fully integrated team. But I added one, which was a neurologist, and not for the cancer issues, but every neurologist I've ever met understands what correlation coefficient is and can compute them. And so they're wizards at identifying these kind of problems in the sources. And so, you have, if you don't have a team, if your hospital doesn't have a team, and we have one oncologist in my hometown. Okay. And, she is so busy, like a one-armed paper hanger. So, I mean, you just can't get it done. So you have to be able to solve problems yourself. And you have to, if you can't do it, you have to develop a team that can. And that may be your caregiver, but it more likely won't be. You'll have to find somebody. And the neurologist is one of the people that can really be helpful in that arena. But it's just, people don't understand the complexity of these things and the interactions that happen. And doctors, are so busy, especially in small towns, that you're not going to get it. But you've got to have one of these teams working with you, because would you rather have the current mortality rate or reduce your mortality rate by 70% by having a good team? That's the question you ask.
So one of the things that you brought up as well is when you have providers that are not in the same network as far as insurance goes or getting that coverage. If someone's dealing with the financial concerns and constricts of networks and insurance, like how do you navigate creating a team when they're from different areas?
Well, the thing is, I mean, so to give you an example, I mean, the good hospitals, the great hospitals do this. But to give you an example of the range of a team, um, the last member I put on the team that I'm getting ready to publish is a music therapist. Well, most insurance companies aren't going to cover music therapists, but the institutions can cover them. Even my hospital, the town that I live in, which has one oncologist, has acupuncturists for their cancer patients. So what you do is you figure the whole thing out. And, um, if you're at a hospital that doesn't take your insurance, you need to change. But I mean, I guess I've been so blessed because I've only had one or two incidences where there was an issue about coverage things. And my principal oncologist wrote a letter and those issues went away immediately. But again, she's very special about what she does. The multidisciplinary aspects of it, if it's part of a team at your principal oncologist, that's where it works. If it's part of a team that you're having to, put together, it's different. Now, today, my physical therapy function, I do it once a week and I pay out of pocket for that because it's not covered here. And the person I've got doing it for me now is an exercise physiologist instead of just being a regular physical therapist. I'm blessed because I've got that function. That's a good question and a tough question to answer, but you have to basically go towards the hospital. Now, the next part about that is the person I didn't have on my initial team. I accepted that role myself, which was a big mistake. And that's the guide or the navigator. That's probably one of the most important people that you can have. It's a lot of times it's a nurse, sometimes it's not, but their job is to make sure you get the treatments you need and make sure that you can get coverage for insurance, and that's their job. And if your hospital doesn't have that function, that's the function they need to have. A friend of mine's wife, and one of the principal research hospitals in North Carolina, she ran their navigator program. And in a 3-year period, they went from having 14 at a big hospital to 24. And I think it's doubled again now because the need for it. And the administrators should like it is those navigators know how to get reimbursement, get coverage. And if you don't have a navigator, if your hospital doesn't have one, you really should consider who else might have that capability for you and provide the care.
I can imagine with someone getting a diagnosis and then, you get a diagnosis and you have to wait a period of time before you have, either the surgery or the first treatment and the anxiety that comes with that. And then you talk about having, numerous people there to provide different levels of care, which, at first when you're dealing with the thought process of everything, that has to be very overwhelming. So what is your advice to people who are dealing with a diagnosis to even get them to look past, oh my God, I have cancer?
I think I was fortunate in how I approached it. I go back to that article I read about that gentleman who was dying. He was so thankful. Well, I mean, changing your attitude to putting a smile on somebody's face and then looking about something you can be passionate about in the future, it can be all sorts of things. I love my photography. I do astrophotography. I shoot eclipses all over the world. And what makes that even better is 100% of the revenue from those images goes to support children's health. And so I'm passionate about that. I'm now passionate about my writing. And so finding that something you can be passionate about is great. The other thing I'm passionate about is I've got one grandson, and he's the coolest thing in my life. He set up rules for his mom and dad that neither one of them can individually come visit me or visit me as a team unless he gets to come too. That's his rule. And he's 6. When I heard that rule that he created, I really encouraged him to stick fast to his guns on that because, you can just see me smiling right now. And because it does, I mean, you've got to find what you're passionate about. And so people ask me sometimes about, Glenn, how in the world did you get into photography at 54? Well, I wouldn't. I've been carrying a camera with me my whole life. It started in 1956 or 57, 58 maybe. We were living in Berlin, Germany, and my dad was an Army officer, and he finally got 30 days vacation, and we called it leave. But my mom decided we were going to go travel Europe, and we had a Volkswagen Bug. I had two sisters and a German Shepherd, and my two sisters and I with the German Shepherd in the back seat. Mom and Dad were in the front. My mom quickly knew that I was going to kill my sisters or pull their hair out at least if she didn't find something to distract me. So she brought me a Brownie camera and taught me how to use it. And that's where my photography bug hit and has stayed with me my whole life. On all my active duty time in the military, I always had cameras with me. And, every backpacking trip, I carried too much weight because of my cameras. I love photography, and living in a place like Jackson, Wyoming, when you're next to Grand Teton National Park and Yellowstone, it gives you the opportunities to do that. So that's where the thing started. And then I had a Caring Bridge blog. And why did I do that? Well, I didn't want to answer people's questions about how I was doing, so I wrote about it. And I always crack jokes about things in my blogs to make fun of myself. And so, that opened up the door to the writing of my first book. And then I've now got 5 out and 2 more coming. My first novel will be out in May, and it's book 1 of a 6-book series. But there's an old phrase, pardon me. It's about the time it takes to do my job expands the amount of time that I have available. So, basically I get up in the morning now and I write and research. That's what I do most of the days. I go to the gym, and I'm supposed to be playing golf again because after my spine surgery, I'm cleared to do it, but I'm having too much fun writing books. And so that's what I do now. And I had spine surgery in October last year. I had a tumor on the L3 root nerve. And so when you have something like that, that's pretty serious. So you research and you find out who the best doctor in the world is, and then you get in to see them. And they do the surgery. You have to wait some time to get them, but you wait and get it taken care of. And that's what you do because they all get paid the same thing. So why not get the best? And so that's kind of my approach to it. And probably the most unusual thing that I found out about my cancer treatment, I found out about last year, about 18 months ago. And that was my middle daughter who was with me when I got my diagnosis from the experts at Yale. I never asked how long I had. She did. Never told me what they said. And they said I had 2.5 years, probably, plus or minus a little bit. Well, I'm sitting here in my 18th year now.
Wow.
And so, and my expected life expectancy now, just from cancer, not from other conditions you could have, is 30 plus years because of the changes that's a result of the multidisciplinary issues and the overall changes in treatment of cancer and cancer-related side effects. And the other thing is I've had 55 surgeries now. I haven't gone into all those. I've had, side effect was one of the other side effects I had, not just the liver one. I had 5 detached retinas in my left eye. I shoot my right eye with a camera, but that was a side effect of of one of the chemo regimens I was on. Thank goodness for correlation coefficients again. And there are other things that have happened. But you just, the first bad surgery I had, they had perforated intestine, 100 perfs in it. And they did the surgery 8 weeks before I was supposed to take my son on a backpacking trip to Philmont Scout Ranch. Well, that was important to me because I had done that when I was a kid in my Dad's dad was on the board of directors of the Boy Scouts for years, and I'd taken that role at one point for a while. It was a big deal to me. So I had to get back into shape to make that trip. And my surgeons cleared me to go on it because I did everything I was supposed to do. It was a 5-hour, 6-hour surgery. And, I wore a brace around myself just to make sure I didn't screw up too badly. But I don't think there's a hill I can't climb. And, at some point that's going to go away. But there's something else, and hopefully this may start boring you, but when I was in high school, ready to go to college, I've been at my new high school for my senior year for 2 weeks, and there was a parent-teacher conference. And so I had to go because I was a senior. I didn't think much of the teacher, but anyway, she told my parents I shouldn't go to college, I should go to trade school. She didn't think I had it in me to go to college. And, that was news to my mom, my dad, and me. And, it didn't change any plans that we had. But 2 weeks after that, we had a test in those days called the Florida Senior Placement Test, which was like the SAT for the state university system. And I got the first perfect score in the school's history. And, that came up with my phrase, only you can stop you. You can't let anybody else stop you. Sometimes you have to stop yourself, though, because could be an ethics situation where you need to show self-discipline to stop yourself. But you don't let anybody else tell you what you can and can't do. You can accomplish anything if you decide you're going to do it. And it may take you longer than other people, but you can do it.
And how much has that mindset impacted your success in this cancer journey? 100%.
Yes, it kind of probably defines a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this morning I wrote the introductory paragraphs to something that's we've decided, I think, to post it. That's my other golden right there. And it's the Complete Cancer Care team. There are about 55 potential members of the team. And I'm sitting here writing it. So I've got an introductory paragraph for patients, the caregivers, and then the institutions. And the one for the institutions is direct. The one for the patients and the caregivers is, written a lot softer, but it's direct. But for the institutions, it is, if you're not doing this, why aren't you? You're going to lose. You're going to hurt your patients by not doing this. And I back it up with hundreds of footnotes from reports from all over the world, research reports. And the United States is behind in this in a large way, because they were doing multidisciplinary meetings instead of tumor boards in Australia 15, 20 years ago. And in Europe, they were doing them 20 years ago. And we're just now getting into it. And again, it still hasn't hit the major media in the United States.
I think it's important too. We talk a lot on this podcast about alternative therapies. You mentioned acupuncture, even physical therapy. There are so many options out there for additional treatments, along with supplementation and nutrition and exercise that really help the body to heal itself, which is so important. Other than the music therapy, what is the most surprising member of your team that people would be surprised to hear about?
I mean, I get asked a lot of questions, and nobody's ever asked me that. So let me think for a second. I mean, it's the exercise physiologist is not the normal person. I determined a couple of years ago that I was going to try to qualify for the British Open in golf. Okay, well, I'm now 70 something, and I'd be the oldest person by 25 years. Well, when you're hitting the golf ball 3 hours a day and doing everything else to try to get it right, it was something. So I had two people that helped me on that journey, and then I had the spine tumor, which kind of derailed me for a bit. But my chiropractor is a former U.S. gymnast, Olympic level. She's a chiropractor. She was on the U.S. wakeboarding team, was the chiropractor for the U.S. wakeboarding team. and then is a PGA certified tier 1 tour fellow chiropractor. Well, I mean, I understood that, and she's also a sports physiologist now. I mean, she is probably the most important person today. Okay, in my whole process, and I mean, if you'd have asked me that, even 10 years ago, I would have not said that. But I don't think that really does it justice. I mean, the the, the most important thing is, I think, is having somebody you can talk to. And that's evolved over time. But I mean, I got divorced right after this started. I'm still single. Um, and, I've got my 2 golden retrievers who they listen well, but they don't talk very well. But having somebody who understands you and cares. Well, my sports physiologist and my golf coach are the 2 people who we do it. We talk about physics in golf, and it's the intellectual exercise of it. But the other thing is, I was chairman of the operating company for IHMC, the Institute of Human and Machine Cognition. And my good friend there, who was the CEO forever, he is probably the one that surprised me, because he's a business relation, but he's a world-class scientist. And Ken Ford's his name, but he's former chairman of NASA, everything else. And when I went to do my analysis on who the best doctor in the world was for my spine surgery, because I wanted to still be able to play golf and hopefully qualify for the Open. He hands me a research paper on it, which identifies all the leading hospitals, all the leading doctors, and identifies the one doctor in the world to do my surgery. Mm-hmm. Well, Ken's been like that silent person who hears me and just hands me the document that I need to read. And he does a podcast on science that's just unbelievable, in human performance. He wrote his first paper on AI, I think, in 1978. So, but he's just the most brilliant person I've ever met. And there's a phrase from a movie from years ago called Mr. Baseball, the old Tom Selleck movie. And the baseball coach tells Selleck, "You've got a hole in your swing. And when the pitchers find out about that hole, you'll never hit another ball." Well, the bottom line is we all have a hole in our swing. And finding the hole and finding somebody or something that'll help you fill that hole is where you get close to actualization, I think. Mm. And that's probably the most important thing that's happened to me. And Ken's probably he's the stopper for the hole in my swing.
So. It's interesting because, this podcast is called My Fit Tribe for a reason, because I found through my journey that surrounding myself with people, again, whether it be chiropractors or the physical therapists, or people that give me spiritual guidance and friends that give you support, that whole entirety, that everything of people there to support you and, again, fill those holes is really what raises your vibration and keeps you challenged and keeps you being that best version of yourself. So you've definitely reiterated that in this conversation.
Well, it's true. I mean, and the hole in my swing today is, I can't, my novel's finished. It's with the editors, and I put it aside to get this new book out, and the whole thing about multidisciplinary teams and fully integrated multidisciplinary teams, which is a term that nobody's really heard of, because there's integrated care, then there's multidisciplinary care, but there's not both. And so, why is a lawyer writing about that topic? Well, there's a hole because nobody else has written about it. And so I'm having everybody I can find read everything I'm writing before I publish it, and identify any mistakes. And when anybody who listens to this, if you see my book or something, or you read something about it, and you think I've missed something, please notify me, because there's I'm not the right person to write it, but there's nobody else doing it. And so, I'm relatively smart, but there are other people who are smarter in this field than I am, and I need their help. And so I'm getting all the help I can, but it's too critical not to do it. And raising false hopes would be the worst thing I could do.
Well, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I take away so many things. Again, surrounding yourself with your tribe, whether it be in your medical care or even just individually. And also the fact that you continue to find a passion and something to do and to find purpose and to look forward to, and how important that state of mind is to your wellness as well. Before we wrap up today with my final question, can you tell our listeners how they can find you and your books, not only that have you written that are upcoming as well?
Okay, I've got a website, which is glensturm.com, GLENNSTURM.com. And, that's where you can get me. And then, I don't read everything that hits that, but if you just say, I need to get Glenn to see this immediately, it'll get to me within 24 hours. That's one person's job. I mean, anybody with cancer or a loved one of somebody, or somebody supporting somebody with cancer, you just say, I need to talk to Glenn. I mean, I don't turn away from that. I embrace it. I have time for that more than anything else, to try to help other people. That's where my real passion is. Mm-hmm. Is the more I can help other people, the better off I am. That's
We've talked a couple times on this podcast. We had a guest, Dr. Steve Treziak, on one of our earlier episodes, and he talks not only about hope, but also when you help other people, how much physically it actually helps your health yourself. And it's just fascinating that the body heals itself more when you are, being kind to others. I think everyone needs to take a few doses of that for sure.
Well, there was a young lady who interviewed me recently. She had brain cancer at 19, and she started her own foundation. And so I'm listening to her for a few minutes, and I checked on them a bit. So they're getting a picture that I took, a 4 foot by 6 foot picture, and I'm going to go up there to their thing and talk to their institute, their annual thing. But they get 100% of the revenue. They can't pay any of my expenses. And it's just the right thing to do. She's just such an amazing person. But any organization that's, I don't take any money for it. I don't let anybody pay my expenses. It gives you purpose and passion. And when you're helping others, what the doctor said is so spot on. It's unbelievable. There is a chemical change that happens for you.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I thank you for sharing your story with others through your writing and through your speaking. And I'm looking forward to continuing to follow your journey. I'm going to wrap up this podcast by asking the question I ask all my guests. It's a 2-part question. So if you, Glenn, today could have a conversation with Glenn of the past, maybe the Glenn who's standing at gate B13 after you get that diagnosis, what would you tell your past self?
I wish I had asked my question this a lot earlier. How do children spell love?
Love?
Nope. Time. And if I'd learned that younger, I would have spent more time with my 2 older daughters and my son. And that it's not about quality time, it's about quantity time. And I wish I'd learned that earlier. I learned that on an airplane from a gentleman who sat next to me. And I wish I could attribute it to that person, because it was one of the most foundational changes in my life. As I said in one of my writings, I said, what I found out was that cancer wasn't the problem, I was. And I hadn't learned a lot of things. So time. It's one of the easiest things to teach people about children is all they want is your time.
Yeah.
And it's so important.
And it goes so fast.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And so now if you, Glenn, today could talk to you of the future, What would you ask your future self, and what do you think he would say back to you?
Are you spending enough time with Sam, my grandson? Okay, I'll tell you the neatest thing that he said the other day. We're in the process of buying a farm together in Oregon, and my house will be 100 yards from theirs.
Mm.
And Sam said his dog's name's Sonny. It's a Saint Bernard Doodle. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so Sam loves him. And Sam's 6, and he's very smart, very precocious in some ways, but just very smart. And he said to his mom, does that mean that when you and Dad are asleep on Saturday mornings, that I can get up with Sonny, and which is his dog, and go over to Grandpa's house and play with his 2 golden retrievers, and he can cook breakfast? And my daughter said, yes. He says he grabbed 2 fists together and said, yes. How do you, I mean, that's what I want to make sure I don't miss. And I'm not going to.
I think everybody should take the time to enjoy those special moments with those we love.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you again for the conversation today. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for what you're doing.